All right, we are holding a very special telecast today in wake of the reforms that are the need of the hour when it comes to the minority community in our country. You would in fact be surprised to know that while the population of the Muslim community in our country has now trebled, their higher education levels are abysmal. They are trailing behind even the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes in our country. The situation of the community is much the same across the globe when it comes to education levels. There are several reasons for this disparity, and top amongst them is the economic disparity that is witnessed amongst different communities and very, very palpable and glaring in the Muslim community. This, in fact, has given rise to a huge number of menaces that not just adversely impact an individual household, but the society and the world at large. There is particularly a massive gap in the North and South India education divide when it comes to the educational qualifications of the Muslim community in our country. And to bridge this divide, there is a group of eminent Muslim luminaries that have come together and founded the Alliance for Economic and Education Development of the Underprivileged. Having successfully organized their first summit in Jamia Hamdard in Delhi, let's get them all on board on our broadcast today and understand from them what is it that they would like to do to bring about education reform within the Muslim community. With me on the broadcast, and it's great to have them all, Lieutenant General Zameeruddin Shah. He's the former Vice Chancellor of the Aligarh Muslim University and the former Deputy Chief of Army Staff. I have with me also Mr. Najib Jung. He's the former Vice Chancellor, Jamia Millia Islamia, and he's also the former LG of Delhi. Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, who's the former Chief Election Commissioner, also joins me on the broadcast. And so does Shahid Siddiqui, who's the former Member of the Parliament of the Rajya Sabha. It's good to have you all on the broadcast with us, and we'll commence this very significant, important, crucial telecast at the moment, given the socio-political scenario that we all find as ourselves in. I'll start off my interview with getting Lieutenant General Zameeruddin Shah on the broadcast with me. I would like to understand from you, sir, the idea behind going about building this foundation, coming up, all you five founding members, and deciding to go about launching this significant initiative yesterday and day before yesterday, when the first event was held at Hamdard, Delhi, in Mehrauli, in New Delhi. How has that entire experience been in the last 2 days? And of course, it's a challenging task, the kind of initiative that you all have come together and to bridge the North and South divide.
Yes, this five friends of us, unfortunately one is not here, Mr. Shahid Sherwani, who is a hotelier of renown. Five of us got together and we said, let's form an alliance. We call it purposely an alliance. And we said, for the economic and educational development of the underprivileged. Who are the underprivileged? Everybody knows who they are: the Dalits, the tribals, the Muslims, anybody who's underprivileged. We are not associating ourselves with any group of people, any religion. We are just going to work for the underprivileged. That is number one. Secondly, we learnt through our observations that the underprivileged in the South, who were probably in a worse position as the underprivileged in the North 30 years ago, because of the fact that they have concentrated on education, their position is far better than the people in the North. They've gone in for education, which is the key to progress. So that is why we felt that we need to work to make sure that the educational institutions in the North learn from the best practices of the South. So that is the aim. It's very clear. Two things which we are going to be totally away from. One is religious activity, and secondly, we will not indulge in any sort of politics. It is apolitical, irreligious. It is only going to work for the underprivileged.
I congratulate you, sir, and the rest of the four founding members for going about and taking for this initiative, this alliance that has come forth, and may it be successful in the coming years. And the question that comes to my mind is about the North and South divide that you continue to mention, the gap when it comes to the education reform and the qualifications that the southern part and the people in the lower income strata continue to have when it comes to a one-upmanship. Is there we talk about the Muslim community particularly and the minority community, and we take a look at the statistics, the figures that we have garnered as per the censuses, as per the various statistics that are held, as per the surveys that are held. It is the Muslim community that emerges as starkly different from the rest of the communities in our country, whether it is Hindus or Sikhs or Jains, or even like I'm just a moment ago mentioned about how the scheduled tribes and the scheduled castes are also, when it comes to higher education, much higher in percentage to their Muslim counterparts. Is there a reason why there is such a discrepancy that we witness?
Yes, of course. It is because of lack of education, and because that is triggered by poverty. See, the poverty, the students do not get equal opportunities. The basic jumping pad, launch pad is schooling. Because of poverty, a large number of the underprivileged do not get good schooling. They do not get good schooling, so they cannot qualify for high education institutions of higher learning, which are the admissions are by open competitive examinations. Mm-hmm. So since they can't get into institutions of higher learning, they cannot qualify for other open competitive examinations. It's a cycle which goes on because of poor background, poverty, poor schooling, lack of opportunities for higher educational institutions, and thus lack of employment opportunities.
Is it also because of the socio-political economic setup in the Muslim households in terms of how they are culturally brainwashed, or there is a certain way of thinking, a certain way of going ahead, and thereby education not being given the dominance that it actually requires, as has been witnessed in history?
No, I'm afraid not. It is not that reason. It is sheer poverty, which is keeping the Muslim community away from better educational standards. There's got nothing to do with traditions or anything like that. I would say it is sheer poverty, but education is going to correct that.
Yeah. So then what could be the correctives here that could be at this point of time through your initiative, this alliance that you have come forth with, can be then implemented, brainstormed upon, and a roadmap be built? There have been certain initiatives that have been taken by state governments, district authorities, central government as well, and have those initiatives and schemes and scholarships and reservations been helpful in bridging this divide?
The government schemes certainly are helpful, but as we have said to the underprivileged, you got to stand on your own feet. You got to do what is right. And the lessons from the South are very clear. About 30 years ago, the economic conditions of the underprivileged in the South were as bad as the people in the North, but they had the advantage of a large influx of expatriates sending money back home.
Okay.
That was properly utilized to establish educational institutions of quality, and that has resulted in the underprivileged rising above, and it became a level play field for them. They are almost at par with the other communities. So we want the educational institutions in the North to learn from the best practices, whatever was done in the South. And I think we are going to succeed in that.
So have you also then studied these roadmaps that have been built, the local leaders and political leaders down south taking initiative? What were the right things that they ended up doing? And like you already mentioned, the remittances that are pouring in from the NRIs, especially from down south, whether it is in Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, that all has helped it building this impetus and allowing for quality education to even reach the grassroots, the poorest of the poor within the community.
Yes, that is certainly going to help, but the people in the north do not have that share of the Gulf remittances. We are going to make sure that, you can start from scratch if you have the determination, if you have the will, and if you have the commitment. And I'm certain that that is not lacking. We are going to, this is going to be a revolution in the state of affairs of the underprivileged in the north, and that will only come through good educational institutions.
Okay. Good educational institutions also require the requisite amount of funding. Can then there be MOUs that can be signed with state governments, district authorities to allow for these schemes, scholarships, reservations? Would they then help?
Of course, any help from the government would be most welcome. But as I said, learn to stand on your own feet. Do things your own way. Of course, if government help comes, it is much better. It will speed up the whole process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stay on with me, Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah. I also have with me Mr. Najib Jung. He's the former LG of Delhi. He's also the former Vice Chancellor of Jamia Millia Islamia. It's good to have you with us on NewsX, and it's an honor to have a conversation with you in terms of education reforms and the minority community particularly. That has been the focus of the initiative that you have taken, of that event, the two-day conference that was held yesterday. It has been massively successful. A roadmap has been charted out. But my question over here would be that Lieutenant General Zamiruddin left us with was the decisiveness with which the communities then come together and build about private institutions that are going to be able to educate, empower these people, these individuals from the lowest common denominator, the lowest strata in our country, and particularly in the north. What has your organization thought of in building this roadmap? If you could share with us a few pointers and how this will be a successful mechanism. Of course, besides the fact that government also continues to put its focus predominantly when it comes to the minority improvement and empowerment in the education sector?
I don't know why we are constantly focusing on the difference between the South and the North.
Okay.
There are education facilities available in the North as well. For instance, and in the East and the West, there is enormous educational evolution, for instance, in Gujarat and Maharashtra, as well as West Bengal, and indeed the Northeast. So let's not just talk of gaps between the different regions of India. And I don't know why you are harping constantly on the backwardness and the lack of education in simply the Muslim community. General Shah has clearly said that the attempt is not to single out any single religious community. We are looking to help the underprivileged, the impoverished, because we believe that lack of education opportunity has a direct linkage to the economic strata of people who live in society. And it is clear that large parts of India suffer from that. You will have economic disparities, for instance, in Odisha, in Madhya Pradesh. Now that's central India, Odisha is eastern India. We are looking at the achievements that have been done by various NGOs and intellectuals and educationists in different schools, in different universities and colleges. And we are looking at the deficiencies in some. If we can bridge the deficiencies, and the way to bridge the deficiencies is to bring to their knowledge the good the good practices adopted by the institutions that are doing well. So the alliance is like a clearinghouse. It brings together people to see how good work they are doing, how good work is indeed done. Of course, we will be making them aware of the government schemes. There are plenty of schemes in state governments as well as the central government that will help the underprivileged. And unfortunately, there is a lack of knowledge. A person who starts a school, for instance, 40 miles from where I am sitting, say in Dasna or Meerut, is unaware of the benefits and the budget that the central government would have to help those little schools.
Fair enough.
We would make them aware. We would make them aware that this is the way to avail those opportunities. Secondly, we feel the quality of teachers is extremely poor. Medieval India, ancient India, has a huge tradition of gurukuls, excellent teachers, children learning at the feet of the guru. Unfortunately, that has all come to an end. Teachers are there to get a salary rather than impart knowledge. And this is the distinction we wish to draw. The distinction between literacy and the distinction between education, evolving further into imparting of knowledge. Of course, knowledge imparted 300 years ago is different from knowledge imparted today. The great Greek scholars spoke of philosophy and metaphysics. We now speak of computers and mathematics. And that is what we want to bring to the poor. You see, you and I are extremely privileged sitting in Delhi and Bombay and Calcutta, where we go to the best schools because our parents have provided us those opportunities. And because of those opportunities, we also go to good educational institutions. And because we go to those good educational institutions, the job avenues open to us. They don't open to the poorest of the poor.
No,
the good schools don't open. The good schools don't open to the poor of the poor. So we want to bring that quality education to the poorest of the poor by borrowing best practices from good educational institutions and instituting them into the weaker schools. That fundamentally is our attempt. That is what we tried in this 2-day conference. And people who have attended, I believe it was a huge success because we had people from the Northeast. You don't understand the tremendous work that is being done in Meghalaya, for instance. India is unaware. There is huge work done in villages in Gujarat, for instance. And finally, before I come to an end, we also want to bring an end to this big misunderstanding about Christian schools or madrasas. These are not conversion centers.
I was coming to that question, yes.
These are not conversion centers. The history of the madrasas goes back to 1,000, 2,000 years, commencing from the Middle East. And then they have a huge legacy in India. The 1857 revolt, the Reshmi Rumal revolt was led by the madrasas. In 1947, the madrasas have played a huge role in our freedom movement. It is never the Maulvis of the madrasas who spoke of Pakistan. They have resisted a Muslim League tooth and nail. And this great misconception that they have become a breeding ground, etc. I mean, it's a complete wrong mindset, which we as educated Indians wish to correct and put before the people of India that this is a way of education. This is a way of education.
It's a way of education, but also traditional, which has not been able to accept the scientific changes and transformations that modern education at this point of time, that is taught out of schools, that is certified by the CBSE or the ICSE or the government certifications, and perhaps that's an issue as well. And I want to talk about that in deeper detail. And the point that I've continued to speak about the Muslim community and those within the Muslim community that percentage-wise are economically disadvantaged and thereby are unable to send their children to school, and which is also very reflective in the statistics that we have, whether it's in the population versus the higher education or the literacy levels. And there is definitely a discrepancy when it comes to the northern part of the country versus the southern part of the country, and that has been detailed by Major General Zameeruddin Shah as well. But I'm not going to get into that. But since we are on the issue of madrasas, then do you think there is a need for reform of the madrasas, keeping in mind we already have the infrastructure? So perhaps that problem has already been addressed. It needs to be given scientific teeth, it needs to be ameliorated, it needs to be brought up in terms of the quality education, scientific education, which has so far been, I don't know, shunned, or are the mullanas or the clerics, the teachers over there still apprehensive of picking that up, or because of the lack of funds, because the madrasas majorly cater to the poor, the poorest of the poor in the community, providing them free food, free lodging, and then the families, the parents really do not have any other place but to take their kids over there into these schools. So are we then dissuading the parents from lining their kids up into madrasas and rolling them up? Instead, pick up the government schools, the CBSE schools that then provide free education for all up till a certain level. How can we go about utilizing both these models of schooling for the betterment of the children?
Again, a very big misconception that the madrasas are cherry of modern education. There is a sea change in the attitude of madrasas over the last 20 years. I would ask you and request you to visit some of the madrasas, even in Western UP, where in the last 20 years, they have introduced mathematics, physics, English as compulsory teaching. The only difference still remains that there is a great stress on what they call Dini Talim, which is religious training. So when you go to the madrasa, they would insist that you will learn the Quran, and there is a system of learning the Quran and reading the Quran. But by no means at all are they a cherry of modern education today. And this is what I was speaking of, the great misconception. I think it is time that people traveled out and saw what is happening in these madrasas.
Okay.
We should not go by the clothes these poor boys wear. They wear a kurta and a pajama, but that doesn't mean that their heart is not ticking the same way as the heart ticks of a boy who lives in Delhi or a girl who lives in Meerut.
Okay.
It's the same Indian with the same philosophy of being a good Indian.
Fair enough. I'm going to cite examples of what is happening globally, particularly in European nations, particularly in France, in the United States of America after 9/11, after the Charlie Hebdo beheadings that took place, and the terrorist act over there. And there has been strong actions, sir, that have been taken by the governments, be it led by Macron or when the 9/11 Obama administration was in presence when that attack took place. And there have been these strong steps that have been taken against madrasas. There has been surveillance, funding has been cut. How is the world at this point of time at loss of understanding what a madrasa stands for and the kind of education that is imparted in madrasas, whether in the United States, whether in France, or whether over here in Assam or any part of India?
I am not getting the drift of this question, because I don't think that President Macron or Obama ever spoke of madrasas. They spoke of a culture that has come through, which has been criticized internationally, an impression or the fact that a certain number of Muslims went completely the wrong way. Mm-hmm. The causes of that we are not going into, but it gave the birth to the ISIS. We have seen what the Taliban are doing in Afghanistan. We are seeing what parts of the tribes are behaving in parts of Pakistan. And that is nothing to do with madrasa teaching. That has to do with contradictions in society which have come up and which have to be bathed in the den. They have to be fought. and so they have to be fought strictly and strongly. And any action that government takes against any kind of extremism is most welcome by any community. But that has nothing to do with madrasa teaching. It has to do with the societal evolution in the Middle East, which has occurred through reactions of behavior of other countries. We are not on that debate at all at the moment. We are talking of education of the underprivileged in India. And unfortunately, like you say, a vast number of underprivileged are indeed Muslims. So they need hand-holding, they need affirmative action, and the government is fully aware of the affirmative action. Only yesterday, the Prime Minister has said so in Hyderabad. The Prime Minister has known to have said that I expect you to have one religious book in your left hand and the computer in your right hand. That is what India is talking about, and that is exactly why we have set up this group, to impart modern education into a group of people who are indeed underprivileged, whether they be Muslim. Let's just not harp on Muslims. Let's also look at the crisis that is faced by the caste system. Let's talk of Dalits and tribals. I mean, the Adivasis of Bastar and Madhya Pradesh. These are very serious situations which we as educated people must be aware of.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Najib Jangji, for sharing those thoughts that have enlightened us over here. I'll have to take a quick short break. I come back with Sajid Siddiqui and Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, who would be joining us on the broadcast and sharing what they think of this alliance and what should be the roadmap and how this gap and divide that is extremely visible and glaring between the underprivileged when it comes to the education reforms that the entire nation at this point of time is waiting for. Let me quickly get in the third guest of the day. Mr. S.Y. Qureshi is the former Chief Election Commissioner and also one of the 5 founding members of the Alliance for Economic and Education Development of the Underprivileged. It's good to have you, sir, and we've already spoken with Lieutenant General Zameeruddin Shah and with Najib Jangji, and since we are on the topic of the madrasas and the reformation that is required, and can then it help the government, the district authorities, the state authorities and the central authorities in being able to inculcate them and utilize this infrastructure of education to reach out to the larger number of people?
Madam, I think I heard the entire conversation for the last half an hour, and you've fallen into a big trap yourself by the converting the debate into madrasa. Madrasa has been flogged to death. I think not one word more needs to be said about madrasa. Najib Saab has already answered it very well. I think if you focus on the objective of this alliance, on improving the quality of education all around, madrasa is one small component for 5% of our concern, but 95% of the education from primary to higher education and vocational is our concern, and I think you should be talking about that. You're going on and on madrasa. Madrasa can be a debate.
Yeah, okay, yes, of course. You rightfully mentioned the fact that amidst all the issues that you have, madrasa would comprise of certain percentage of the issue of education reform. And since we are on that topic and the fact that the alliance has been built, sir, so then how are you then going ahead and telling the government and the people and bridging that gap between the lack of information and awareness between these two institutions and then bring education to the lowest common denominator? Yeah. How exactly is going to is that happen? Are there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pointers that have been built out as a roadmap, or are we just talking about some sort of a cooperation and a coordination with the government and the people, the lowest common denominator, and how exactly is this going to bring about a transformation, keeping in mind the statistics, the figures, the percentages? And we have schools, we have the primary schools, we have the secondary schools, there's free education that is provided, there are schemes, there are reservations, and there are scholarships. What is it that is missing that the students are not being able to get themselves enrolled in these schools and these educational institutions, and the percentage continues to be dismal, particularly to certain societies, to certain sections, to certain communities?
Your question was so long-winded, I have actually lost the drift of the question. But let me bring it back on focus. Number one, in 1986, there was the new education policy which pointed out something very shocking. And it said that the Muslims are the most backward educationally, more backward than even the scheduled caste and neo-Buddhists.
Yeah.
Since then, this topic has come up again and again, but no solution and no reform has actually happened. Today also the situation is still the same. The Muslims are still the most backward. While we have decided that we will talk about the underprivileged, but there is no denying the fact that the most underprivileged are the Muslims, and therefore we will not be apologetic about working for the Muslims because they need it the most. Right? Therefore, now we are trying to first identify what are the issues, what is holding them back. Why are they backward? Secondly, as we have discussed, that some parts of India, particularly South, they are doing very well. We can learn from them. The purpose of Alliance, we will not build a school, single school. We will not build up any vocational institute or anything. We will only first do a survey, make a directive of all the institutions which are doing something or there's something worthwhile here and there, and then we'll try and bring them together for common learning, learning from their best practices. There might be good institutions in the north also. We need to understand why is it that one particular institution succeeded while 90 others failed. So, and we'll try and give them,
Okay, fair enough. So, is there a team that has been built at this point of time? What are the brass tacks here? Are there practical solutions? Are there these teams then going to go about surveying, going about into towns and villages, then going about into these certain sections? What are the actual practical problems that is stopping these students, stopping these children, stopping these parents from sending their kids to free schools?
We were born last week. And it is too early to talk about those concrete 10-point, 20-point program. We will come to that. Right now, we are still studying the current situation so that we know what should be the chart, the way forward for us. And yesterday, day before, there was a conference, the first education conference for nation building. The title was Education for Nation Building, the way forward. And we learned a lot from there because what we want to do is some NGOs told us how they are doing a great work. And others who must be doing the same work, they were the audience, they heard and some kind of exchange started and we will build on this.
Okay.
So it is only in infancy, this organization. So we will have a long-term vision and course of action in due course.
Okay, fair enough, sir. I'm also going to get into this subject of, and then this has been answered by Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah, this has been answered by S.Y. Qureshi as well, but doesn't it become of cruciality that there is support of the government over here? Because when it comes to poverty and those who are the underprivileged, who are not empowered educationally, job-wise, and because of other issues, socio-political, socio-economic issues, is an alignment and cooperation and coordination sought from the government by alliances like you with the privileged members, highly well-known public figures? Will that help in turning the tide for the underprivileged? Is that leverage that you are going to utilize in being the bridge between these two segments? I'll say the government and then the lowest common denominator here.
Yes. Now, so you've been mentioning about our relationship with the government. Without the government, nobody can function. And the schools, there are millions of schools that we have, they are mostly government schools. The problem is the Muslim community is not even enrolling. They have the poorest enrollment and highest dropout in government schools or even private schools, let's say. So one of our efforts will be to find out from the community, when the school has come to your doorstep, why are you not sending your children to the school? Please send them to the school. And second thing which we have pointed out in the conference yesterday, when you see the dropout at the class 6, class 7, children started dropping out, particularly girls when reaching puberty. We have said, look, it should be a challenge to us that no boy, no girl should drop out before completing his schooling. So we'll work on that irrespective of the community. Of course, Muslims are more a default here because they drop out more. So we will address that. And thirdly, there was working with the government. One of the things which we seek to do is, just as we are making a directory of all the institutions in the country, we are also making a directory of all the government programs, central government, state government programs for education, for health, from which NGOs can benefit. They are not even aware of them. So we will make a directory, we'll pass it on to the NGOs, train them how to apply for various facilities and schemes which are available, so that they become, they join the mainstream in availing of the government facilities.
Okay. As for Qureshji, I know how sticky a subject that everybody finds is. It's been massively politicized, and I'm going to again come back to madrasa reform. And I'll say this because this is deeply penetrated, especially when it comes to the Muslim community and when it comes to the poor Muslim community. And can it be utilized as an advantage than being looked upon as a disadvantage or having no use whatsoever? Can there be a coordination with the state governments or the district authorities in allowing for CBSE or ICSE curriculum to then be brought about in these schools as well? I think that would be a brilliant way of reaching out to maximum number of children from Muslim community particularly, in being able to bridge this divide, bridge this percentage difference.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to clarify that actually madrasa is the most misinterpreted and misunderstood term. Madrasa is a Hindi word, Urdu word for Pathshala. Okay. Call it Pathshala. So what does Pathshala do? Pathshala doesn't have any religious connotation. And secondly, in any case, madrasa is a preschool. Originally, it started as a preschool. Yeah. And where, for instance, I want my grandchildren to learn the Quran in the first 5-7 years of their life. Do they teach Quran in the primary school? So we need some institution where they can go for this. There is no conflict, there is no clash with the secular education. And in any case, in yesterday's conference, there was a lot of emphasis, and we were very happy to see South Indian organization telling us how a madrasa student was able to get first division in 10th class and 12th class and join medical colleges and others. So how they are joining the mainstream. This was the theme yesterday, day before, and that will be one of our focus areas also.
Okay, fair enough. And good thing that you brought about this point. And talking about, again, I'm going to talk about the North and the South divide. Is it primarily because of the financial differences and vagaries that we witness? Is it only because of the foreign remittances that pour into the South households that there is this massive sea change in the percentage of people who get educated and are able to get their students, their children, their wards enrolled into primary and secondary schools?
Well, I think poverty is one factor, but there is also an attitudinal factor. There are poor people in scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, where they are doing better than the Muslims. Why? So there is also some attitudinal problem which we need to address, which is actually a paradox. Quran, the very first word revealed on the Prophet was Iqra. Read, O Prophet. And the Quran repeatedly says that acquiring education is compulsory for men and women. And there is a hadith, Prophet says, acquire education even if you have to go to China, which means that obviously China didn't have any Quranic center there. It means like even if you have to go to the moon to acquire education, it's a must. Therefore, it is paradoxical that despite that Muslims are backward in education, and which is what we are pointing out to the community leaders and opinion leaders, we'll try to persuade them that your religion talks of education. Why are you most backward? Yeah. It's a shame and embarrassment, and we will flag this to them.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, sir, for sharing your views. And quickly getting in, Shahid Siddiqui is the former member of the parliament and one of the 5 founding members of this very noble initiative, this alliance. And Shahid Siddiqui, you've heard it from the rest of the panelists, from your co-founding members of this initiative. The question that I would like to ask you is with regards to the transformation that is required, not just within the schools, but in the mindsets of individuals and of these households, because tomorrow if if a student is being sent to school and right up to the time that she is 12 or 13 and does not hit puberty, it's fine. But as soon as a girl turns adolescent, the parents decide to make her sit at home. Now, this is something, a change that will have to be brought in the households. It is not possible in the schools. It is the mindset of the parents and the grandparents that will have to be changed. How do we do that?
Yes, we have to change the attitude of the society, not just the Muslim society, but society in general. One point I would like to make, that the difference between South and North is not just among Muslims, it's among everyone. In Kerala, it's 100% literate, while Bihar and UP are the most backward in education. So it's not just the Muslims who are backward in North India, it is general. Similarly, economically, South is doing much better than North generally, not just among Muslims. So we have to understand that the difference is not just with one community, it's across the board. Secondly, with economic change, with social change, with educational change, things change, attitudes change, and that's what we have to do. And the purpose of our organization is to build bridges between madrasa and the school, bridges between the government schemes and those who are the recipients of these schemes. It is not reaching them, so we have to build bridges. We have to take it to them. We have to build bridges between successful institutions and not so successful institutions. And then, more than anything else, today the whole attitude towards education has changed. And we must change that, because it is now online education. The child who is going to, even in every home, a child knows much more than all of us, because we had to go to libraries, search 100 books to know one fact. It is at the tip of his finger to get the information. And in the villages in UP, I work in villages, I work in Muzaffarnagar, Bijnor, Saharanpur, and there the people are getting information which their generations never had. So the whole thing is changing today. For that, we have to bring about change in the education and among the teachers. Teachers are not changing. My problem is teachers are not changing. Therefore, we are going to focus on better teaching, better quality of teaching. We are going to reteach the teachers in these schools and bring about the change. So change is required. And let me tell you that the reason for backwardness of, say, Muslims in North India is not just poverty, is not just their attitude, it's the history. The partition, 1857 onwards, they started getting backward. Hunter Commission report in 1890 pointed out that Muslims were getting educationally backward. Their mother tongue was taken away from them, and so on. After 47, the elite migrated to Pakistan. Those who were left here were uneducated, poor, those who were going for the first time in education, and Urdu, their mother tongue. People, most of them were literate in Urdu. Like me, I studied always in Urdu. My mother tongue was taken away from me. It's not of no use to me. I don't get a job because of that. And therefore, I became backward in that sense, educationally backward, because my mother, and if you take away the mother tongue of any group, then it takes 3 generations for them to re-emerge, and that is what is happening to them. So there are so many reasons. We just can't go into all the analysis in our TV debate. But yes, there are so many reasons where we have to create a level playing field for a better nation, and it is for the sake of the nation, it's for the country, because if 20%, 30% remain backward, then the country remains backward, and therefore it is our secular duty, it is our national duty to see that those who are backward are able to come up, and we are able to take the government schemes, we are able to bring them into the educational mainstream. But when I say mainstream, I say educational and economic mainstream.
Okay. Then Shahid Siddiqui ji, understanding from you, would reservation be a sustainable method to bring about this change, bridge about this gap?
No, totally not. I'm totally opposed to any kind of reservation. No reservation. It is a positive attitude. It's a helpful attitude which is required, and that is what we are going to do. It is, as you said, a change in attitude which is very, very important. And that is the education of the parents, education of the families, and that's where media can play a very important role. Instead of presenting a negative picture of the community continuously, positive sides have to be brought. And I can tell you, Many people yesterday who attended our conference for 2 days were not aware that such wonderful madrasas with such higher education were working in villages in Gujarat, in Meghalaya. There is a university, Maulana Azad University in Meghalaya, which is run by Maulana, and it is one of the most fantastic universities. If a channel goes there, you will be amazed. You will be amazed by the kind of work they have done. The medical colleges they are running, the engineering colleges are running, and a lot of faculties are run only and only by women. And nearly 50% in some of the Muslim madrasa institutions now today, more than 50% are girls. And madrasa, I have met dozens and dozens of madrasa schools. And as a member of parliament, I worked in madrasas. I've been working with madrasas to modernize them and bring modern digital education to them, because digital education is extremely important. And I realized that they are so keen for this. They were only afraid. They were only afraid that there will be a lot of intervention. We are assuring them, I mean, if only everything is not to be done by the government. It is for our duty to take modern education, digital education, to bridge the digital gap and to bring them to this kind of modern education. They are keen. They want to do. It's our fault. It's the fault of the Muslim middle class, the educated, who did not go up to them, and that's why we have created this group.
So then, sir, I would like to understand from you, why is it that this kind of narrative that gets peddled, not just within the media, I would say in the society, in terms of the stark difference of the actuality of the madrasas in our country or across the globe for that matter, versus what is perceived as by an individual, and like you mentioned, how can we bridge the gap? And in the same breath, I would also like to understand from you, these official training centers, the education centers, the schools and the colleges that are given these certifications by the government versus the madrasas. What is there a gap? Is there a difference? How can we bring the madrasas to the same level of quality education? You said there is an inclination. The Maulvis are open to it. How can we speeden up this process?
It is being, one thing we must understand, according to surveys, the government surveys, hardly 4% of Muslim students go to madrasa. So this idea that Muslims are going to madrasas is not right, number one. Number two,
but also the 4% would be the poorest of the poor, is what I'm assuming. Yes, which is where the problem lies.
Yes, and they are the poorest of the poor. If the madrasa was not there, they wouldn't have had any education, because they wouldn't have. Now the midday meal is being given in schools, but earlier it was a madrasa which was giving them food and the clothing and the living, and a lot of them are orphans. A lot of them are without any means. I know of so many parents. In fact, I started my education in a madrasa, and even S.Y. Qurashi Sahib started in education in a madrasa, which is now known as Delhi College or Anglo-Arabic School. It was earlier a madrasa. It's more than 300 years old, and that's where we started. So madrasa was just a school, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, our first president, studied in a madrasa. Even Manmohan Singh started his education in the village in a madrasa, because at the time before partition, there were hardly any schools in the villages. There were only madrasas, and people used to go to become literate to madrasa, where they were taught Urdu and Hindi and basic maths. Basic maths was always taught in the madrasas, and there was a time when higher education was also there in the madrasas. It is only with the Britishers coming that the madrasa and the school got divided, and they got separated. The modern education, so-called modern education, and so-called ancient Pathshala education was divided. So we have to bridge this gap, bring them into the mainstream. They want to do that. And Indian madrasas are totally different from what is happening in Afghanistan or Pakistan. They were brought into some kind of militancy because of modern historical reasons, because of what Americans wanted them to do after the invasion of Afghanistan. But that's a topic which we can discuss for the cows come home. So we will not go into that. You need a separate debate on that. Nobody talks about that. But go and see madrasas. I'll give you a list of madrasas not in one area, in all the states of India, and send a team. It will be a very, very interesting. It will be watched. I know it will get a lot of TRP if you do that madrasa thing without a biased mind. go with an open mind and you will have a wonderful show.
Okay. And then purely for academic
You can talk
reasons,
about
sir.
the women
Purely for
education.
academic reasons, Shahid Siddiqui ji, historically with the gurukuls and the madrasas being the main norm, being the main institutions where education was imparted, and in wake of the years and the decades that have gone by, there has been a transformation of the gurukuls to the modern education system. And I'm not going to say that all gurukuls have converted, because there are certain of these temples, particularly down south, where there is only religious education that is imparted, and there are only certain percentage of individuals, very tiny percentage of individuals that get themselves enrolled in it. But we'll not get into that. But how has the evolution of the Gurukul and the Madrasa been, you as an individual having witnessed it in the last decades?
That's a question which will require a very long answer, and I'll have to do some research myself, because I have not been to many Gurukuls and not studied the Gurukuls. But let me tell you that madrasas, Indian madrasas, had a very secular modern approach from the very beginning. They were supporters of Mahatma Gandhi, opponents of Jinnah, opponents of Muslim League. They were very strongly against them, and they always, and that is, I give a lot of credit to Indian Muslim madrasas for seeing that Indian Muslims do not go the way Muslims have gone to militancy in many parts of the world, and that is, we salute Indian Muslims for that. And Indian society is equally responsible for it. Indian constitution, Indian democracy. It is because of Indian democracy and the constitution and Indian society that Indian Muslims are very different. So let's not club all Muslims together in the world. The Kerala Muslim is very different from a Bengali Muslim, or Bengal Muslim is very different from a Punjab Muslim, as a Tamil Hindu is different from a Punjabi Hindu. So let's not think that all Muslims are produced from one factory. So that is not the case. And also talk of today the real problem is the employability. Most of those who are doing their MAs or BAs or even engineering are unemployable, and that's where we are going to focus. We want to make them employable. India, unless we focus on that, we are not really focusing on real issues. We are focusing on irrelevant issues. We must have discussions. What has happened to education, that 90% of Indians are unemployable globally and within the country, and even when they are...
Yes, and then there's a difference between being unemployable versus being unemployed. So that skill set, and since so it comes in the larger ambit of education reform, and bringing this percentage of individuals from the society that are the lowest strata because of the economic discrepancies, because they are economically disadvantaged.
Not really that. It is because of colonialism that we have adopted the colonial education, which wanted to produce clerks and not innovation. We did not allow, because I have been a teacher, I taught in Delhi University for 15-20 years, and I have seen that asking questions is normally not the attitude of the teachers and parents. It is the attitude of the parents. Sawal mat pucho. Bade jo keh rahe hain sun lo. That is in the classes. And that's where I used to spend first 1 month telling my students how to ask questions. Why, how, where, when. And that is the fundamental of education. Unless you ask these questions, you are not going to be really educated. And we are going to focus on underprivileged, especially, are not used to asking questions, not used to knowing what is to be done after their graduation and how to become unemployed. They are skilled, they are very skilled, but they don't, I mean, if you are skilled, if you are a very good carpenter, you can't get a job. If you don't know English, you can get a job in Canada. You can migrate to Australia. Australia needs a hell of a number of carpenters and plumbers. In Canada, you can get PR within months if you are a good plumber, but you have to know English. You have to create IELTS. So IELTS, in order to create, we are going to create that. We are going to work on that. That is the purpose of this organization. So this organization will be doing a lot of positive work for nation building.
Okay, and Shahid Siddiqui ji, before I let you go, one last question. Since you mentioned about the colonization of our education system, so the yardstick not being Harvards and the Stanfords and the Oxfords, but the ingrown institutions within our country, and how does your alliance go about doing that?
We don't even have 10 universities among 200 best in the world. and China, among the first 50, we hardly have any, and therefore we have to focus. We are just producing a large number of engineers, large number of scientists, large number of teachers. We are not really producing innovators. We are not producing the kind of scientists we want, the kind of, and that's where we should be all be focusing. And that's, we will doing it in all way, and we'll be helping the government, we'll be helping the society to do that. And and especially among Indian women, and same with the Muslim women or Dalit women are doing much better. They are coming up, and that is where we are going to focus mainly, because that is, those bridges also have to be built, and women are to be given all the opportunities. A level playing field has to be given to underprivileged, and the most underprivileged in our society is a woman. And if she comes from a Dalit or a Muslim or a rural background, she is the double.
It becomes even more difficult a task. Absolutely. Thank you, Shahid Siddiqui ji, for joining me on the broadcast. I also thank Lieutenant General Zameeruddin Shah, Mr. Najib Jung ji, and Mr. S.Y. Qureshi for giving us their time and explaining to us what this entire alliance with regards to empowerment and education and economic empowerment and educational empowerment, that is going to be the cornerstone for bringing about this massive transformation that the nation requires at this moment.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.